So it's just missing the mark. So I go to Christ. We go to Christ with our stuff every day because we're in covenant and agreement with Christ. We go to him. He cleanses. He refreshes every single day when we goof up. What a wonderful thing this covenant is. Let me tell you a story. Most of you know it, but we're just going to review it together. Covenant began between God and Abraham. And Abraham was told by God, I want you to leave everything you know. I want you to leave the good country you're in, and I want you to come with me because I am going to make a great nation from you. And from you, Abraham, and your children and your children's children, your descendants will be like the sand on a seashore, like the stars in the sky. And I'm going to come into agreement and create this nation from you, a nation set apart for me, God. A nation that will be in covenant and agreement. And Abraham and God cut covenant. And you'll have to read the story in Genesis. But this is the beginning of the agreement where we come and we begin to come under the banner of God. Covenant works both ways. God does his part. He protects, he delivers, he heals, he restores. There are many, many names of God. In fact, I wrote a study guide for those of you who want to take that course called God's Great Names. I think it's what it's called. I've written 20 of them. I don't remember. Does that sound right, Tori? So, yeah, something like that. It's about the great names of God. Knowing his character and understanding him. He is a covenant-keeping God. And Jesus is our path to the covenant that we could not keep. Listen to me, we couldn't keep all the rules and the laws. The Jewish laws were dietary, they were restrictive, there were all these things. And the Israelites kept sinning, and we see in our story that they loved God and then they crashed. And then they loved God and then they turned from him to idols. On and on and on. And we poignantly see this picture when they leave God's land and go to a pagan land of Moab. But God, as I always say, but God. He so loved the world that he sent his son. He looked down. He knew from the beginning of time when Abraham made that covenant, there'll be a day when I'm going to have to send my son because there's no way they can keep all these things. There's no way they can't sin. And sin causes separation with me. So I am one day going to send my son. And he did. So that we could be grafted in. We could come into covenant through the blood of Jesus Christ. That's the short version of a long story. So we come into this story of Ruth and Naomi, and we see that the Israelites are like this. We love you, Lord. No, we don't. We love you, Lord. Not today. They come into this up and down thing where they just couldn't hold it together. But these were God's people, and every time they cried out to him, he showed up. And so these are the people that Naomi was a part of. This was her God. This was the Jewish God. This was the one true God. And this is the family she was raising. She was raising a family to be godly. And what happened? Elimelech, the head of the family, sees there's a famine in the country. He did what he thought was best, you all. He did what he thought was best. If your family is starving, you quickly try to figure out a solution. Listen to me. This is where we go wrong. Because God always has the best solution. This is where we fret. I had one of my daughters was very, how shall we put it, rebellious. And she was tough to raise. She was really, she really shored me up in my faith really fast. But here's the deal. This was used for my own good. And as I began to learn about Christ, and learn what he could do for me, and learn that the things that I couldn't do, he could do for her, the more I recognized that I needed Christ more. And this is what happens. Elimelech, back to him. He made his own solution. A lot of times with my daughter, I'd go, okay, today I'm going to do this and this and this. Slam. All right, well then we'll try this and this and this. Slam. And finally the Lord said, now are you tired yet? Are you willing to surrender her to me? Because I have this journey for her that is pretty magnificent. But it isn't going to be pretty. I knelt beside her bed. Y'all, she was only 8 years old at that point. Really, we're talking a long journey. I knelt beside her bed and I said, okay, Lord, I'm exhausted. I'm willing. Of course, I was like the Israelites. Sure, I will listen. Sure, I'll obey. Oops, oops. But there was a day when she became a teenager. And all hell broke loose, and it was hard, and I didn't know how to navigate it, and I didn't know what to do with it. And this time I went by beside her bed, and I laid my hands on my pillow, and I said, I'm done with doing it myself. You see, Elimelech, although his idea of taking his family is a natural one, you want to feed your family. We don't know, and I dare say he may not have gotten at the foot of his bed and said, help me. Is there another way? Because God has a great way. Well, so his plan was to sojourn, which means he was supposed to go just for a little while. And then sojourn means you go back to your country. Well, that sojourning turned into 5 years, 10 years, I don't know how many years it was, to the point where his sons married pagan women, the Moabites. And we know from Deuteronomy that God specifically said, do not intermarry. Do not marry into the pagan nations, those women. Well, he did, and they did. The daddy dies, and here we are. But today's lesson is the great return. Because God, even when we don't turn to him, just like that song said, he is sovereign over us. Even when we forget to kneel by our bed. Do you think when it was 8 and I tried and did my own things when my daughter was 8-year-old, you think he forsook me? No. He used that process and that journey to refine me. It was like sandpaper. He used that in my life for my good. And here's the end of the story. She is the most magnificent daughter anybody could ever ask for. How many of you in this room know my daughter? Okay. Is she not unbelievable? I hope she'll watch this. Makes me cry to think, even though the enemy intended evil, God intended good. What are you dealing with today? What kind of Elimelech situation are you dealing with today?